We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positively into the snow season this week and into the Ravens head coach search. And we're done with college football finally. So cheers to Indiana. And we got 2 football games this weekend. Luke Jones joins us now. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I'll have candy cane scratches to give away 2 weeks from now. Hopefully the snow is cleared out by then. And we're doing a cup of soup or a bowl. All of it brought to you by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at GBMC. Also want to give some love to our friends at Coppin who had me over on Sunday. Dr. Jenkins, the whole crew. I saw former WNST intern and delegate Sean Stinnett over there. I saw Calvin Ball, Howard County executive, as well as a whole bunch of old friends. So it was a great experience over Coppin watching Dawn Staley come in. Meanwhile, we've been talking leadership here all week, and Stefanski to the Falcons. The Dolphins get their coach. John Harbaugh's having press conferences in the swamps of Jersey, holding his wife's hand because that's what he always does. And we're bringing in second interviews, I think. Luke, I'm going to let you speak to this a little bit. You're on the beat out there in Owings Mills for the purple plumes of smoke that will come on the WNST tech service, brought to you by Cole Roofing and Gordian Energy whenever the magic moment happens. Some of these decisions are happening fast in other places, I think. And part of this was you and I discussing 4 teams left, at least 6 candidates left in the pool who are playing football this week, that this thing's not going to happen this week here, I don't think. But it's moving a little slower here than it is in other places.
It is, and I think it just comes down to the fact that, one, the Ravens are going to be really selective about this. The fact that we know they've talked to at least 16 candidates in the first round. Now, a couple of those guys have since taken jobs elsewhere. Kevin Stefanski, as you mentioned, Robert Saleh, in the aftermath of everyone talking about Kurt Cignetti and Indiana and that fantastic story. He agreed to become the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. So that's another individual the Ravens had talked to. He's someone that I had mentioned.
Well, what it means is the Ravens were not serious about him. Because if the Ravens were serious about him, they'd say, "Hey, come on in here. Let's get you a little bit more money. Let's give it a minute. Like, tell the Titans to powder out a minute." You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how it works. So when these guys wind up in other seats, it means the Ravens really didn't want them. Because if the Ravens were serious about it, they would put the brakes on it for the Titans. As I see it.
Yeah, yes and no. I think it certainly speaks to the fact that he wasn't their number one choice by any stretch of the imagination. I do think you have to recognize that there are, even this year, where there are 10 openings, right? Which is the most we've seen in 4 years and ties a record, I believe, and all
Well,
of
the
that.
Titans say get back to us by the end of the day, and that's that,
Well,
right? Like, literally.
it just comes down to it. I've equated it to a game of musical chairs. Like, you can want the best job, and certainly the Ravens' job, and now the Bills' job with Sean McDermott being let go, and how that kind of threw a
Dude, the
grenade.
league didn't want Bill Belichick. Belichick thought he was going to get a gig somewhere. The Arizona Cardinals somebody would hire him and give him $100 million. He didn't get that gig. Greatest coach in the history of the game ever. Didn't get a gig. So he didn't find a seat. Billick didn't find a seat again that agreed with him. He thought he was going to coach when he got fired here. Just never happened. The right seat never, because he wasn't going to go coach the Cardinals. He just wasn't.
Well, but that's kind of the point I'm making, though, that you never make assumptions. And yes, even if the Ravens really liked Kevin Stefanski or they really liked Robert Saleh, they weren't just going to hire them on the spot. They weren't going to have them pass others in the line that they really want to talk to. And if you're them, you're saying, well, even if the Ravens like me, that doesn't guarantee that I'm going to get the job. And these guys are offering me a job. So that's why, and I'd said that all along. And look, this is where you have to have discipline as an organization, as an owner, as a general manager, and look at it. If you're the Ravens, I mean, the Bills, think about the Bills now. They're 2 weeks behind most of these other teams.
Let's talk about this for a minute, because that's the craziest of all the ones of all the NFL firings in this league. I didn't necessarily think that Bisciotti did the right thing with Billick when he fired him 19 years ago, whenever it was. Like, at that moment, it was like, hold on here. You got a Super Bowl winning coach. He was 13-3 last year. He's calling the offense. He had a 38-year-old quarterback. Like, he didn't like Brian. And now the more that I see Steve on display, he and Brian would never get along. He's not sensible enough for Brian. He's not mellow enough for Brian. to like it's too out here for him. So I could see why that didn't work. But McDermott's been working there 10 years, won big games, loves the city, city loves him. Players are upset. I am really it really you know what I said to my wife? I said to my wife, it shows that Pagulas don't know what they're doing. That's what if I'm a Bills fan, that's what I'm saying. Like, come on, dude. It's one thing to get rid of Harbaugh after 18 years, after a bad year, when he doesn't like the quarterback and the quarterback doesn't like him. And I'll say that out loud. I don't care who. This was about Lamar and John for me as much as it was about losing, and as much as was he wasn't the right guy for Lamar moving forward. And I don't know that the Bills would feel that way about McDermott, but I'm stunned of all the firings that don't make any sense in the league. I mean, Tomlin never got fired. Peyton never got fired. Like a bunch of those guys never got fired. I thought after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I thought it was kind of quick what they did with Peterson. I thought that, but the Eagles are clearly a banana republic. They're gonna change coaches the way hockey teams change coaches. That's their methodology, I think. This guy's fighting fans in the stands and he can't get fired. And McDermott's done everything to help them build their stadium. It PU on the Bills ownership for me. That's how I feel about it.
They haven't won. I mean, they haven't won in January, right? I mean, it's the same story we've
They
been
didn't have
talking
a good
about
enough
here.
team this year, dude.
Oh,
As I
look,
see it, they didn't have a good enough
let
team
me
this
be
year.
clear. If it were me, I would have been looking much more at the general manager than the head coach when you look at that roster. And Brandon Beane got a promotion. So yeah, look, not being able to win in January takes a toll. It absolutely does.
And
And
whose
with
fault it is, right?
right, and the fact of the matter is, you have Kansas City, who has dominated for the better part of the last 8 years. This was the year they were down, and Buffalo didn't get it done. The Ravens didn't get it done. And even though Mike Tomlin stepped down, all the chatter and all the shortcomings in Pittsburgh as far as their ability to win a playoff game, by extension. So I think it's a little bit, where you look at this, that one team does it and then another team does it again. Based on what what Rooney said, it sounded like they weren't going to fire Tomlin, but that was coming at some point, right? It was either Mike stepping down this year or it was going to be next year. Assuming that they weren't going to break through next year and win in January. But when you see other teams do it, it empowers you a little bit to do it yourself, right? And look, I'm not going to sit here and say that I have full confidence that the Buffalo Bills are making the right decision here or that they're going to hire someone who's better than McDermott. At the same time, McDermott hasn't broken through. Their defenses have failed in their January losses, and he's a defensive guy. So, I at least see it. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, but it's a very similar story to what we've been talking about here in Baltimore, where you've got to win in January when you have an MVP quarterback. And I think that also is very much a question of who do you pair with Josh Allen in the same way of who do you pair with Lamar Jackson. And that's why I think so many of us have been talking about an offensive minded head coach. And, whether it's going to be them promoting Joe Brady. I mean, Joe Brady's going to, reports he's going to get a second interview with the Ravens here. So maybe Joe Brady ends up being the Ravens guy. Maybe it's Brian Dable going back to Buffalo.
Maybe they fired McDermott because they want to keep Brady.
It might be. Ultimately, it might be. Or they might say, you know what? Brian Dable's the guy that did the lion's share of the work for really making Josh Allen the quarterback that he is today. Maybe they bring him back, right? So, look, I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
Well, it is about personalities. Let's be really clear about this. And
sure.
Watching Eric serve and fealty to Bisciotti on that dais last week, that was weird. Seeing Eric on the dais with Steve and looking diminished next to Steve. When you know what I mean? It's like Steve's God and Eric's just the guy that went 9-8 or 8-9 and the ball went through and it didn't. Last week's optics was weird for me, and I know how Steve feels about Eric, and I know how Eric feels about Steve, and I don't know. To my way of thinking, Eric and Steve. Eric can make Steve believe in him more than John could, because John would burr up and say "F you, Steve," and Eric's not an "F you, Steve" guy. Eric's a whatever you say, Steve guy. Thank you for the privilege of allowing me to breathe and be the general manager of the Ravens. And I think in other organizations, Brandon Beane with the Bills people, or him saying to them, don't fire me, fire him. It's his fault, not my fault. Because that's really the way this works with the Holy Trinity, right? Like when there's general manager, coach, and owner, it worked this way with Marvin in Cincinnati, right? Like Marvin had the confidence of the Brown family. That's all that mattered. Mike and Katie liked him and they trusted him. And it wasn't about him blowing smoke up their backside or that, but there is that relationship side of do you trust him more than me or me more than him? Because at some point, we're both going to be gone and you're going to own the team, but one of us is going to be gone and one of us is going to be picking the other person. So if John had survived here and the players weren't good enough, if that were the perception that the players had underdelivered and Eric would have been the odd guy out, John would have been the part of picking his football picker. He would have been the grocery picker. And I think that that's an issue that Parcells understood early on. By the way, we talked about coaches. We talked about Belichick. He was the coach of the Jets for 30 seconds, remember? I mean, there have been some weird seats that happen this time of the year to think that Joe Brady's going to wind up in Buffalo or that there was an insurrection there and Josh Allen liked Brady the whole time or Dable the whole time because those were his guys. And when you're paying the quarterback 50, 60, $70 million and his face is the first thing you see when you land at the airport, he's going to survive the coach. It happened here. Even though the coach was super strong here, it happened here, right?
Well, I mean, that's the reality. There are only so many quarterbacks like that, right? And 2/3 of the league at a minimum. I mean,
And they're only like that for a minute. They're only like that for 3 to 5 years. They're really not. There aren't a whole lot of Aaron Rodgers that hang around 15 years. If you think Lamar is going to be running the franchise in 2030, you're further along than you think I am at 32 or 33 because he won't be. This is a temporary, right? Lamar's running this hiring cycle, not the next one.
that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think it's longer than 3 to 5 years, but your point is well taken. It's at kind of a 5 to 7 year, 5 to 8 years.
Well, Mike
Something
McCarthy
along those
lasted a
lines.
lot longer just because Aaron Rodgers did.
Sure. So I mean, it's you've got to win, and you've got to at least get to Super Bowls, right? And if you don't, we're seeing what's happening here, and I think this is only going to become more extreme. I think we're seeing it before
It's
our
hockey. It's
eyes.
hockey. Yeah, we're going to have 3 year, 4 year runs, not 18-year runs. That's the way most of the league
Well,
is. When you lose, the Ravens haven't been that way because they haven't lost. If this coach fails and Lamar turns an ankle, and there's a couple of 5 and somethings and 6 and somethings and whatever, this is going to be quicker, and that's when Steve's going to sell the franchise because Steve wants that. Steve liked an 18-year coach. Not every owner is
sure.
going to like that. I don't know if David Rubenstein cares who the Orioles manager is, and if this doesn't work out, 3 years from now it'll be gone. And that really is sports, right? The NBA and the NHL, they change leaders like socks. Baseball's been a little different because baseball, just in a general sense, has had LaRusses and Torreys and Bucks and guys that last a little longer. But even with hockey, the greatest hockey coaches of my lifetime have coached 4 or 5 teams.
Yeah.
Trotz being one of them is now back on his fourth team.
Well, I made the point of a couple minutes ago, and people were talking about it in the aftermath of McDermott getting fired on Monday, but this is the first time since 2022 that there have been 10 openings. Of those, 4 years ago. We're not talking like 15 years ago. 4 years ago. Of those 10, two are left. And one of those two, Todd Bowles, just basically fired his entire coaching staff. So it speaks to what the turnover is
And
like.
they stink. A different owner would have fired him. To your point, the Glazers must really like him. There must be a bond of we're not doing this again. We're not bringing in Dable, and we're not giving Harbaugh 100 million. Like there is a resignation, and the Miami guy's been through this 5 times this year, right? He was going to fire his coach in week 10. He fired his general manager. He was going to keep his coach. He was going to keep his coach. He was going to keep his coach. Then he fired his coach. That like these guys, they're billionaires. You saw Bisciotti's act last week. Next week he might not like Chad Steele. Who knows?
I mean, they're billionaires, and as Steve Bisciotti said, they have the power, right? I mean, it's but it speaks to one, how demanding the job is, and how high expectations are, even in places where, frankly, the expectation shouldn't be that high. Because you look at some of these guys. I mean, you go back to that hiring cycle 4 years ago, and Chicago with Matt Eberflus, Nathaniel Hackett in Denver. right? Lovie Smith in Houston, which, was kind of, I mean, Lovie was disrespected through that. I mean, that was kind of a charade, and he was the pawn that the Texans, I mean, he had 1 year. There were no reason to think they were going to be any good. They weren't any good, and then he was fired, right? I mean, but you go down that list and you kind of see some of those jobs, and you say, well, that individual got a year, that individual got 2 years, and they were bad when he took over. So what was the expectation that he was going to suddenly make them good? That's where this Ravens job and this Bills job are so unique. I mean, even the Pittsburgh job, for as much as we say, well, it's the Steelers and the stability, and they've had three coaches since 1969, they've got an old roster and they have no quarterback. That Pittsburgh job is not like step in here and you're going to win
Oh,
right
and they
away.
just won the division. So whatever you do isn't winning the division.
Well, I mean, it just comes down to like the expectations. They won a lousy division, but they won a division, but Rooney can say all he wants that they're not going to rebuild. They need to rebuild. I mean, they do. Like the best thing Pittsburgh could do would be to go 5-12 next year and get a franchise quarterback. I mean, they need to do that. Whereas the difference with the Ravens and the Bills, whoever is hired, and you talked about this a little bit the other day, the expectations are very high. I mean, the expectation is going to be high for whoever is coaching those two teams because they have an MVP quarterback, because they have rosters that have been really close. Whether you thought the roster was good enough or a little overrated or needs to be better in this spot or that spot, they've been teams that have been right there. But it is still funny. And I think I said this to you in jest via text the other day, where all these teams, and especially like in the AFC right now, where you look at the Ravens, you look at the Bills, to a lesser extent, the Steelers, but still you could put the Steelers in there, that they're going to hire these new coaches just to have Kansas City come back and be really good next year because, well, it feels like that's what the Chiefs could do. So I say that partially in jest, but it just speaks to, that not getting over the hump is a heck of a thing, right? It's great to be there. It's great to get in. It's great to play in the playoffs. But when you do that, the expectations rise overall. And when you don't meet those expectations or you don't keep going and you don't break through, eventually there are going to be consequences for that, as we're seeing right now. So I'm fascinated to see who the Ravens are going to hire. I'm fascinated to see who the Bills are going to hire. Pittsburgh, I think that job should have way more patience attached to it because I just don't think they're in a position to win at a high level going forward until they get a quarterback. And not to mention their defense is expensive and old at this point in time. But it is. I mean, this is rare territory. I think I saw. Can't remember who put it out there, but they were talking about the number of times that an MVP quarterback has been available. Or not available. A head coach job with an MVP quarterback attached to it has been available, and I mean, it's
We got
the
two of them, right? Like,
yeah,
no.
the list is wild. I mean, you go back to Brett Favre in the late 90s, and you go back to trying to think. I mean, Johnny Unitas in the early 60s. I suppose post Eubank at that point. And I mean, Burt Jones in, I guess, 1980, I guess it was. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, I saw it on
Well, when
social media and I
Kubiak
can't
took
find it now,
the
but
Broncos, he had Peyton Manning too recently, right? Like,
sure,
I'm
yeah,
just
I mean
thinking of some
it's
people
happened.
that
Yeah, like let me be clear, it's happened. I'm not saying that this is completely unprecedented, but to have two at the same time, that's kind of bonkers. I mean that really is. So
well, these are elite. These are considered elite teams. These were the teams that were supposed to win the division. There was 8 months ago. These were 12 and 13 win teams, and neither one of them made it there. And both of their coaches got fired. Both of them in the Andy Reid tree. And we're going to see what they come up with. And I just found the Bills thing to be a little. I'm taken aback by
it's
that.
fine.
I thought it
Look,
was unfair, and I don't know if McDermott becomes a candidate here or not. I don't think. I guess not. Right? Like he's damaged goods. All he did was win 13 games every year. I mean, come on.
yeah, yeah. I mean
It's like
it
Marty
is.
Schottenheimer or something like that.
Well,
Doesn't know what he's
and I
doing.
think I think what's fascinating about this is what I just cited, where 4 years ago you had 10 openings, 10 guys come in, and 4 years later, two of them are left, and only one of them is really perceived favorably at this point, and it's Kevin O'Connell. By the way, there's
He had
plenty of talk
one.
about he hasn't won, and there's questions about his quarterback
By
situation.
the
So
way, I looked at money with these guys. He's making $13 million a year. He got paid like an established head coach when he came in, and Zach Taylor's still only making $4.5 million in Cincinnati from his first contract. And he may have gotten a bonus for the Super Bowl or whatever when he got there 4 years
Bengals are
ago.
cheap.
But the Bengals are cheap.
Notoriously
cheap.
Yeah.
And you see this.
That's why they haven't fired him yet, probably.
How they, well, exactly. Well, right. Exactly. Exactly. So you get what you pay for to some degree. And I'm not saying the Ravens are going to be cheap at all, but they're not going to have to pay Nathan Shieldhouse $12 million a year.
Yeah.
They're going to pay him $7 million a year, $6 million a year. Bottom, you're a 34-year-old head coach in the league. I'm not paying you $14 million a year. I'm giving you 5 years and $6 million a year. I'm giving you $30 million. It's more than you've ever had in your life. You want to coach Lamar Jackson and come in here and win? I'm Steve Bisciotti. I just paid my last guy $20 million. I'll pay you $20 million, but that's not. So there is a point where you hire that guy, and I know we talked about this earlier in the week, and then you pay Jim Schwartz $5 million to be your defensive guy, or you pay Brian Dable $4 million to be your offensive coordinator, or whatever it would be. That's the way this would be. And with Dable, his money's probably garnished. But McDermott had to have 3 years left on a deal at $15 million a year, right?
I would think so. I mean, I haven't looked at it,
right?
But
yeah,
I would assume it's at least had a couple years left,
right? Yeah, but the amount of money these guys make, it's as wild as saying, what does Adley Rutschman make and what did Buster Posey make on his way out? It's that. I mean, 3, 4, 5 million for the bottom. And, Cliff Kingsbury gets the job in Arizona. He was making $4 million, $3 million bucks, while John and Tomlin were making $18 million. That's the weird. Because you don't see salaries of the coaches much, and we don't talk about it much during the year. And most of it's very private. It's not like the Players Association. Now the Green Bay Packers make everything public. They pay LaFleur $5 million a year. So John is making 4 times the amount of money that Matt LaFleur is making. It's crazy, but it's true.
Yeah. I'm don't quote me on this as gospel because I just did a Google search, but it's saying McDermott was only making about $8 million per season. That would be surprising. 9 years into it.
Yeah, I found a chart a couple of days ago that really felt accurate. It did not feel like internet, and I'll pull it up in a minute and I'll read it off to you because I just got to find it.
But I'd also say with some of that, it's not subject to a salary cap, right? And your point's well taken. That said, if another team wants to hire Nate Shieldhouse, then you're going to have to pony up a little bit more, right? Not $20 million a year, but you might have to give him, rather than 6, it might be that you give him 8 or 9, right? Which, relative to John Harbaugh or Andy Reid, that's still, a fraction of what they're
I'm going to do something
but...
I never do, and this will be for people out watching us on the web, because I can pull up this chart and I'm not 100%. It's 100% accurate, but it looked pretty damn accurate to me. And this is what I saw: O'Connell at $13 million, LaFleur at $5 million, Dan Campbell at $11 million. Ben Johnson got $13 million because he was the hot coordinator, the hottest coordinator, the guy you can't live without. The way you get him is you overpay him. Nick Sirianni's at $15 million. Dan Quinn, $8.5 million in Washington. Brian Schottenheimer in Dallas, $4.5 million, because Jerry's cheap and he couldn't get a job any other place. Nobody was willing to pay Brian Schottenheimer $10 million to be the Browns coach or whatever. So the Browns coach Stefanski was making $3.5 million. He got a major raise leaving there, right? Like literally, the Falcons are probably giving him $8 million. Because the Falcons were already given Raheem Todd Bowles was undisclosed. Let's see here. Canales undisclosed. I'm just looking through other places. Raheem Morris was allegedly making $4 million. So maybe Stefanski got 4 or 5 then. I don't know. But Brian Callahan was getting $3 million, and they just got rid of him and they hired Saleh. Saleh's defensive coordinator, they didn't have to pay him $8 million to get him, right? They're paying him 5, 6. He's happy to have a job. So part of this is there's some guys that are happy to have a job. Sure. And then there's John Harbaugh or Mike Tomlin who say, if you're not paying me $20 million, I'm not coming in. And that's where Brian was 20 years ago. Brian's like, I'm a $6 million coach. I'm not working for $1.5 million. I'm not taking the Lions job. and that's where it was.
That's fair. That's fair. And I mean, that's part of this. And I, I'll always say though that because there's no salary cap, to me, if if you go cheap on a coach, or if you go cheap on your coaching staff, or you go cheap on your weight room or your strength coaches and your trainers, that's just a sign that you're not a serious
But
organization
it's
because
also a negotiation for your agent.
no, of
Liam
course it is.
Cohen got
But
10 million last year. Ben Johnson got 13 million last year. Mike McDonald only got 9.5 2 years ago.
yeah, which he'll be getting more here very soon, especially if
And
he
Kevin
takes them to a
O'Connell got
Super Bowl.
13 million.
Yeah.
And Dan Quinn, who went to a Super Bowl and should have won it, only got 8.5 million from the Commanders because he was just happy to have a chair. Vrabel got 14 million from the Patriots.
I mean, it comes down to leverage. You know, how much, what's your demand? Do you have other teams that are trying to vie for your services? That's why I said, like, I agree with your general point about Nate Shieldhouse. And I know you're just using him as an example in this exercise, but if two other teams want to hire him, then that price is going to go up. You know, even for the Ravens, right? The Ravens might not have to offer quite as much as the other teams, but it's got to be close, right? I mean, it's not going to be like they're offering 8 and the Ravens are going to offer 3 and he's going to take the Ravens gig,
Well,
right? I mean,
Jason Garrett turned down Bashotti's money.
so yeah, I mean it's and there are always different reasons that are going to be at work here. So I think to bring it back to just the discussion with the Ravens and where they are. I mean they've hired or not hired. They've interviewed 16 guys. I mean the most recent Campanile, the defensive coordinator for the Jaguars. We know Anthony Weaver is going to get a second interview. We know Joe Brady, reporting from the NFL Network says Joe Brady. But we also know Vance Joseph, Davis Webb, Clint Kubiak, and Chris Shula and Nate Shieldhouse. 5 of the 16 candidates they talked to are guys that are playing their teams are playing in conference championship games. So you can't bring them in for a second interview until next week. So if I'm not saying all 5 of those guys are finalists, of course, but let's say at least a couple of them are, then that's reason to believe that unless the Ravens fall in love with Anthony Weaver, they fall in love with Joe Brady or whoever else they might bring in for a second interview this week, and they just say, you know what, this is our guy. We don't need to talk to anyone else, which I'd be a little surprised, if I'd be surprised if Eric DeCosta would feel that way. Now, maybe Steve Bisciotti would feel that way, meeting with one of these guys for 8 hours at some point this week in Owings Mills. But, that leads you to believe that this hiring probably not going to come till next week. So we'll see. Again, as we've seen with a couple of these teams, if you identify someone and you want to make sure they don't leave the building and you just say, hey, he's our guy, because at the end of the day, you can try to make it as more of an exact science as much as you can. There's still art involved with this. I mean, there's still the unknown. There's still the human element. There's still, I made the point a couple days ago where there's this fixation on the Ravens hiring an X's and O's guy, an offensive or a defensive minded coach, to kind of move away from the CEO model, which I hear, and I'm fine with that position. That said, there's still the CEO element of a head coach that any head coach, whether you're a defensive genius or an offensive genius, you still have to run the football team. You're still representing the football team. There are still administrative tasks and responsibilities that you have as a head coach that is wildly different from being a coordinator that you have to consider. That's why you can't just say, well, I really like that offense that so-and-so ran in with this team. I think he's going to make a great head coach. That's only part of it, right? There's way more involved to this. So that's where, I said, I made the comment that, the idea of a CEO head coach has almost become a 4-letter word to some Ravens fans that were fatigued with John Harbaugh and that model, but those elements still have to be there. Like you can't just hire an offensive-minded coach who has no ability whatsoever to lead a football team, in the way that a head coach needs to. We've seen that. How many great coordinators have we seen over the decades that you thought, man, that guy's going to be a great head coach, and doesn't work out? And not just because of that, but because of the team he's joining, because of the general manager, because of he doesn't hire good assistants. I mean, there are all kinds of different factors at work here. That's why it is wild.
Are you going to give me money to hire the assistants I need to hire?
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot to it, and that's why it is crazy from that standpoint. And again, this is not me saying the Ravens made the wrong decision. This isn't even me saying the Bills made the wrong decision or that Pittsburgh, if they had fired Tomlin and he hadn't stepped down, if they were making the wrong decision. But history tells us that, especially looking at those three teams and how they're perceived, and obviously the Steelers have been a notch, at least a notch below the Ravens and the Bills in recent years. I think we'd all agree with that, regardless of what head-to-heads look like for Baltimore and Pittsburgh, the overall level of success in the regular season and all that. But history would tell us that at least one of those three teams, and quite possibly two of those three teams, are not going to end up making a great hire here because it's just that difficult to do. And that's where you do look at this thing and say, what, fortunes favor the bold, and I hear all that, but yeah, there's a lot at work here. And Bisciotti alluded to it, and we've heard other owners and other people that hire managers or head coaches talk about this, that you end up hiring someone that you don't know all of that well. I mean, maybe like Anthony Weaver would be an exception. Like, when you promote from within, that's different. But when you hire someone that's an outsider, so to speak, or maybe has been in your building, a year, but then he goes somewhere else and he coaches, elsewhere for years and years, you have a first round interview that's over video in this day and age, generally speaking. I mean, the Ravens did a few of their first round interviews in
How
person.
long do they last? 2 hours, 3 hours?
I think they can last up to 3 hours for the first round.
Thank
I
you.
believe.
That's why I ask you.
Okay. I could be wrong on that. I think that's for the video. And you know what? That might be for those that are still under contract elsewhere, I think, and their team's still playing. Like what last.
If somebody's unemployed, you can do whatever you want, right?
Yeah, sure. So, but I think there's a time limit on those. But the second round, I mean, these guys are going to come in and they might spend 10 hours in the building on, a given Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday.
Well, they better do it before the snow gets here.
Right. Yeah. Sounds like could be a
I don't want the Monday interview.
Yeah. I mean, some of the early forecasting on that's crazy. But yeah, I mean, but that said, how well do you really get to know someone in 8 hours?
Oh, it's speed
or
dating.
10 hours.
There's no doubt about it.
There's definitely that. I mean, that's why it's so important. Like what Eric DeCosta and Sashi Brown and Ozzie Newsome and probably others, they probably delegate some of that heavy lifting to others. I mean, that's why you're making calls. You're calling everyone that you know. And a lot of this is even the scouts, connections that they've had that, maybe you might have someone who worked, you're interviewing someone who worked in college not that long ago. And you're calling people that at some of these schools and rival schools. And, what do you know about this guy? What did you know about this guy when, from a recruiting standpoint, right? I mean, there's a lot to it. And the teams that can one, collect as much information as possible, and two, filter that in a constructive way to try to come up with the most accurate composite you can of someone, and then to sit down and to narrow in and drill down on what's going to be important as far as what you're talking about in an interview. I mean, the teams that do that, they have the best chance of hiring the right person or a right person, but there's still going to be some unknown there. I mean, there just is. And I think that's what's fascinating, especially for the Ravens and the Steelers here, who had the same coach for roughly 2 decades. I mean, think how much the world has changed since 2007 when the Steelers hired Tomlin to replace Bill Cowher, and 2008 when the Ravens hired John Harbaugh to replace Brian Billick. I mean, think about social media alone and that impact on the world and young people and football players, right? I mean, just that, let alone so many other things. That's not to say that you can't make a good hire, but you're certainly not doing things exactly like you did 20 years ago when you hired a coach. I mean, it's
well, I mean, Harbaugh comes
in
as the analytics guy, and he's speaking Eric's language because John didn't care about analytics. It was Eric's thing. So John's first word in New York was analytics, and that makes him sound smart in New York.
Sure. And I mean, things that he asked for in New York that they're going to apparently give him as far as staffing and analytics department and all those types of things. Those were things John Harbaugh was talking to the Ravens about back in 2008. I don't think. I mean, if they were, it was on a very rudimentary level in terms of, hey, baseball has analytics now. Maybe these are some things we need to be doing as an organization to try to gain an edge. But now, all these years later, things like that are commonplace. I mean, if you're an organization that's not doing those things, you're behind. I
Well,
mean,
I know
it's
when Marvin came here, he was saying, Ted had no idea because Buffalo was run by Marv Levy, and and Cowher was a forward-thinking guy,
right.
right? So Marvin brought things here. He's like, we're doing things here that they were not doing in Pittsburgh. Now we're bringing them here. And then Marvin, when he got hired in Cincinnati, he brought Brian and Ozzy's way
Of
because the
course.
Bengals didn't know what they were doing.
Of
And he's like,
course.
no, this is how we won. We changed a lot. When I brought some Pittsburgh, Rex brought some Buddy, and Brian brought some Denny Green, and Ozzy brought some Bear Bryant, and this is how we decide to do football. And that was all part of Phil Savage and Eric DaCosta and early scouting and Ozzy and the process, trusting the process. We're gonna have a process, and this is what we're gonna do with every kid. That's baseball's changed dramatically, right? I mean, in your time in Moneyball and
It's a
analytics and
totally different game. Yeah.
totally different game, right? Like even just the way pitching is, the way all of it's done. Football was way behind in that category. And Eric brought that up to me a decade ago when he started befriending Sig Mejdal and Mike Elias. I mean, I'll say this out loud. It's true. Mike Elias can agree to it one day or not. Eric DaCosta got Mike Elias hired from the Orioles because Eric DaCosta went to dinner with John Angelos to talk analytics and recommended Sig Mejdal, who was doing the Sabre this Monday here in town. And Eric got into analytics through his love of baseball. So that's where it came in the side door a decade ago with the Ravens. I don't know what the Arizona Cardinals do. I don't know what the Miami Dolphins do. Anthony Weaver would be a great guy to say, hey, how did they do it in Texas? How did they do it in Miami? What goes building to building at this point? And I don't know enough people in the game to know that. And Harbaugh wouldn't know either because he hasn't been in other buildings. He's only been in his own building.
Well,
So, guys that have been in 3 or 4 buildings would have a much better, especially when guys come here, right? Guys come to Baltimore and they're like, Trevor Price came here, so this is way better than the way they did in Denver. I mean, I remember hearing that, and that's part of how the Ravens have this reputation of being forward thinking, right?
yeah, but that also goes back to why you're talking to 16 candidates in the first round, because you get to hear about Denver and Sean Payton and what they're doing there. You get to hear about Seattle and what, even though the Ravens are very familiar with Mike McDonald, still you get an idea of what they're doing. Clint Kubiak, their offensive coordinator. I mentioned Matt Nagy, right? At no point did I actually want Matt Nagy. Was I ever saying I want the Ravens to hire Matt Nagy? But to me, it was an opportunity to pull back the curtain a little bit on Kansas City and how they view the Ravens and how they do some things and what do they do with Patrick Mahomes, or some little tidbits or little ideas of what they think about Lamar Jackson that you might implement regardless of whether you hire the guy, but you might just take that
But
idea
if
and
you're
say,
Matt
hey,
Nagy, you're trying to get the job, so you're not holding back. I don't
right.
think.
I mean, there's a little bit of gamesmanship at work on both sides with that, but you go down that list and I mean, Mike McDaniel, say what you want about how his tenure ended with the Dolphins, but
he's a genius.
They had some really explosive offenses where you look at that and say, hey, as our head coach or maybe as our offensive coordinator, depending on who we hire, right? I mean, but you go down that list and you're finding out about these candidates, but you're also picking brains. I mean, shame on the Ravens if they weren't going to talk to someone connected to Sean McVay, right? And with how good the Rams have been, whether Nate Shieldhouse is a very serious candidate for the head coach opening or someone that they say, man, that kid's really smart. I mean, maybe we could hire him to be our offensive coordinator, even if we don't hire him as our head coach. But point is, you want to talk to as many individuals from as many organizations that you perceive to be good organizations to find out about them as candidates, but you also learn. You learn about yourselves. You learn about other teams.
By the way, who's the best coach in the league? Can I just ask you that? Because like you started mentioning McVay, and I'm thinking Shanahan or whatever. If you could hire anyone to come in and pay him $25 million right now, you can make him the high. Who is your guy? Because that's really like,
yeah,
we haven't ever discussed that in all of these years. And John Harbaugh, he's great. Mike Tomlin, he's great. Andy Reid, he's great. He's my guy.
Yeah.
I thought Sean Payton was a turd. Like, I thought like him coming back. My God, he might win with a backup quarterback this week. He looks like he's a Yoda at this point. Like literally, after all he's been through, he seems to be a grown up. All of it. I mean, he was a wild guy. He was a drinker, party guy. Like all of that back in the day. He's like grown up and mellowed out to be the CEO kind of coach where you'll, and I wouldn't have thought that a year or two ago, but I think differently about him now. But I think Shanahan, McVay, I think McDonald has a star on him right now. I've always liked Kevin O'Connell because I spent time with him. I would
Yeah.
hire him. Ben Johnson has a little juice about him, right? Liam Cohn went down to Jacksonville and he's smart for a minute or whatever. D'Amico Ryan smells good. He's only making $4 million a year. He made more as a player. So fascinating, but what are we looking for? I would have said Sean McDermott's a top 5 coach yesterday before he got fired.
I would have disagreed with that, although I would have said top 10 coach. I I probably, if we're going to take into, because we need to take into account age, right? I mean, Andy Reid's not going to be doing it much longer. I mean,
I
whether
think
it's,
Dan Quinn's a hell of a coach. He coached my team.
he's nowhere near my top five though.
Fair enough.
Look, there's plenty of, and some of the names you mentioned
He was
are
in the
guys.
NFC Championship game last year with a rookie, just so you know. He was really smart this time last year.
Yeah. But at the same time, I think that's where you need to look at the sample size, and I think McVay would be the guy for me.
I agree with that. I
Um,
think that's universal, by the way.
and people will say, okay, well, he had Matthew Stafford. He took the Rams to a Super Bowl with Jared Goff as their quarterback, also. So I think you look at that. I think Shanahan deserves, and this sounds kind of weird because I think he gets plenty of credit, but when you look at what he's done with Brock Purdy, what he had done with Jimmy Garoppolo, and we saw Jimmy Garoppolo go elsewhere, and who's Jimmy Garoppolo starting for right now? No one, right? So you kind of look at that and you say, man, he's been someone who's made it work with different quarterbacks. I mean, that to me is a big thing. I mean, can you make it work with different guys, right? I mean, Andy Reid, he had a great run in Philadelphia. He had a really good run in Philadelphia, despite not winning a Super Bowl. But he didn't become this guy that we perceive him to be now until Patrick Mahomes arrived, right? And that's not, let me be clear, I'm not saying that to pick on him or to diminish him. It speaks to so many of these coaches become Hall of Fame coaches because they're then joined at the hip with the Hall of Fame quarterback. I mean, Bill Walsh would tell you that Joe Montana and to a lesser extent, Steve Young, even Steve Young, that was more George Seifert's guy. But the point is, they make you look really smart. They make your system look better than it even is. So that's where to me it's a little more impressive what Shanahan's done, what Sean McVay's done. Think about what Sean McVay that Sean McVay Matthew Stafford pairing, and obviously that's going to be pending what they do on Sunday. And I'm picking the Seahawks in that game, but man, if they get to the Super Bowl having won 3 straight road games and Matthew Stafford could be the MVP and all of that, you think about what the perception was of Matthew Stafford 7 or 8 years ago. What came to mind when someone said him? Losing, right? The Lions. They didn't win anything, right? And everyone thought he was a loser. Well, he gets to LA and you realize this guy's a heck of a quarterback, right? And but that right there reminds that you still, for as great as a quarterback can be, that he still has to have the right structure around him. And that's why it kind of brings it back to where the Ravens and the Bills are right now, where you have organizations that fired longtime coaches who had success. 2025 aside for John Harbaugh, Ravens had plenty of success in the regular season with Lamar Jackson. The Bills have had plenty of regular season success in January success until they run into Kansas City with Josh Allen. But when you have that kind of quarterback, you're asking, am I maximizing it? Am I getting the absolute most I can get out of it? And both those teams are taking some risk here. There's no question about that. But at the same time, if you're not breaking through, you need to go out there and find someone that you think can help you break through, right? I mean, I've seen a couple people make the comparison to whether we're talking Harbaugh or McDermott. I've seen people making the comparison of Tony Dungy in Tampa Bay, right? They bring in Gruden. and they broke through and they won in Gruden's first year. Now,
with Dungy's team.
yeah, right. I mean, so it just speaks to, but
Joe
you could also,
Altobelli with Earl Weaver's team.
but you, no question about it. But you can also find example as much as you find those examples, you can go find examples where it doesn't work. So there is some risk involved there. But yeah, to answer your question, I think because McVay and Shanahan have now been doing it as long as they have, but are still young enough where you say those guys could coach another 20 years if they wanted to. I mean, I don't think they will. Like, especially McVay, he's already
He already
contemplated.
said he didn't want to do this,
I mean,
right? Yeah.
but if we're in a vacuum, just looking at his age compared to Andy Reid, where Andy Reid is not going to be doing this much longer than, I don't know, maybe another 4 or 5 years at the most, right? I think those are the guys that I would really look at. But that said, Mike McDonald, 2 or 3 years might be on that list, right? I mean, any coach, lots of coaches can have great years, right? Lots of coaches can have a really good 2 or 3 year stretch. I mean, John Harbaugh really, when we look back at his tenure, what are we going to really view as truly being great for him? It was his first 5 years, his first 7 years where they made the playoffs six times, right?
Well, he's just hitched his wagon to a quarterback up there. He's going to get his $100 million, but he might get some 4 and 13 sandwiches too if things don't
Maybe,
go well.
maybe. I mean, but if you're them, you're saying, well, but John Harbaugh hasn't been that. At the worst thing you could say about John Harbaugh is that he still had a really high floor. Like he hasn't had these 3 and 14.
You know what he's had?
Seasons.
A really good He's had a top 5 quarterback most years. In 18 seasons, he had a top 5, top 7 quarterback. Certainly top 5 in his own conference quarterback. All of the time, other than when Joe got turned sideways in 15 and was no good in 17, and Lamar's been hurt 3 out of the last 5 years. So,
I mean, yeah,
and won MVPs in the years when he's healthy. But yeah,
sure. Well, but at the same time, I mean, it goes back to what I said about Andy Reid, right? I mean,
Mike
Reid.
Tomlin's been winning divisions with 42-year-old quarterbacks, and goes to Bubby Brister. So there have been some guys that don't have the talent or don't have the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
That
said, some of those head coaches, as time goes on, John had influence on the roster. Mike Tomlin's had influence on the roster, right? So I agree with you, but also you have to point at that and say, well, doesn't he have to own some of that inability to make it work at the quarterback position too? So, it's a catch-22. I mean, all of the sports are tricky. And I mean, winning in the playoffs, tricky, right? How many times have we talked about the 2 Ravens Super Bowl teams and the luck and bounces that went their way along the way? And you can look at some other teams like the 2011 Ravens, where it didn't go their way with Lee Evans and Billy Cundiff, right? And so, I mean, it's tough. It's really hard to do. And that's why it is, to go back to your original point about McDermott, where you look at it and say, man, it can be harsh. It can be hasty. But at the same time, if you don't have the belief that you're breaking through, you do kind of owe it to yourselves, to your fan base to try something different. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. We could be talking about the Ravens hiring another coach 3 or 4 years from now. The Bills could crash and burn and trade Josh Allen because he wants out because they hired the wrong guy, and or Pittsburgh could hire the next coach that they're going to have for 20 years, and in the next year or two they draft a franchise quarterback and they're back to being the Steelers of old. I don't know.
It's a silly season right now. It is.
It is. It's so funny. I mean,
and the games are getting played this weekend, and it's going to snow like hell here, and there's going to be a Super Bowl, and we're not going to care much, and the Ravens are going to put their purple plumes of smoke out next week. But, I mean, these next 10 days for the Ravens, this directs the franchise for the next 5 years in so many ways.
It does. But the crazy thing about it is no one's really going to know for a while whether it really works or not.
What's crazy, Sean McDermott is so much more advanced and further along than any of these cats we're talking about. Any of the Salas, any of the Vance Joes, any of the Nate Scheelhouses, any of that. And I don't know that they're even going to look at him.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
That said, you could say the same thing about John Harbaugh, right? I mean, John Harbaugh has way better credentials than most of the 16 guys.
The fact that he walks through that parking lot where they've done nothing but lose for 15 years and they stink, and they're not the Jets, but only because of their helmets, literally only because of their logos.
I mean, they've been lousy for a decade. I mean, there's no doubt.
They're
Yeah.
horrible.
So
And that he is going to be the thing that deodorizes it. I call bullshit on that all because I've met John. I like John. I respect John and all that. John had great football players here, and that's a testament to Eric, Ozzie drafting well, scouting well, how much money they spent. The Mark Azevedos, the Joe Ortizes, the George Kukinis. It's not about one person or any one person. John came into a situation that Ozzie had laid and did well with all of it, won, but he hadn't won anything in 12 years. And John's demeanor, John's smallness, John's dishonesty. And look, I can beat John up all day, and I'm watching it. I want to see John Harbaugh playing this time 2, 3, 4 years from now with the Giants hat on, hosting NFC Championship games at the Meadowlands. I'll bet whatever's in my wallet that's not going to happen.
okay, uh, you might be right.
I don't
I
think
think
John's a better man. I don't necessarily think he's a better coach. I don't think he's a better leader. I think he's more fraudulent as time has gone on for me. The longer I've been exposed to John Harbaugh, he gets an F for me for a fraud. That's what that when I think of John Harbaugh for the rest of my life, knowing what I know about him, knowing the text I have in my phone that are lies, I think of him as a fraud. So when I see him get the most money, go to New York, do all of that, God bless him. He might win. I wouldn't hire him. I wouldn't hire him because I don't trust John. If John Harbaugh texts me right now and said, "Hey, I don't work there anymore. Let's really sit down," and I'd say, "John, you're just a liar, dude. You had all that opportunity to do that with me. Yeah, you love my wife. You want to get like all the stuff with John. I'm not a John guy." So that being said, the
you
fact that
think.
he's perceived as being the guy who's going to completely go in there and change everything and fix everything, if he does, he's to Bill Belichick what the Modells felt about Belichick when they said, "Get out of here. We don't want you. We don't need you. Take your hoodie, take your profanity, take your nastiness, and just get out of here. We don't want you around here anymore." And Belichick's going to the Hall, but nobody wanted to hire Belichick 2 years ago either. So part of this is, it's a solitary job to some degree for being such a public job because ask Sean McDermott. I don't think he deserved to get fired this week, and he got fired by the nice people, the Pagulas, who have done nothing with a franchise that was complete dog shit before he got there. Right? Like you talk about deodorant. Sean McDermott did everything to the Bills that the Giants are hoping John Harbaugh does. I mean, the Ravens didn't need to get fixed when they hired John Harbaugh. They were in pretty decent shape. They won 13, they had Ray Lewis, they had Suggs in his
Mm,
prime, they had Reed in his prime. Going up there with, and I saw the roster of people. He had good luck with Cam Scatabo, and okay, go get him. But I'll be shocked if John wins 13 games, 4 out of the next 5 years, and hosts a championship game and goes to a Super Bowl. Count me as shocked for that 100 million if that happens, because I don't think he's the best coach in the league. I don't think he's the best in-game coach, review coach. I think he's a good CEO. I think he's hired decent coordinators, but I think he's had great talent. And I think the talent, and he would agree with that. The talent's everything. If he had the Arizona Cardinals talent the last 10 years, he wouldn't be
who's
John
winning?
Harbaugh.
That's fair. Who's winning with that with lack of talent? I
He had
mean,
a lot of talent this year and didn't win. So
I mean, who really wins with
I'm just saying the difference between him
roster?
as a $20 million coach and D'Amico
Fine.
Ryans as a $4 million coach, and the 20 years of age difference in them. I'm fascinated to see who the Ravens are going to hire. Like, because it's going to be about Steve, and Steve's going to have to fall in love with whoever he falls in love. It's very obvious last week. I mean, Eric's going to bring some people to the king, and the king, I have the power. Steve's going to pick the coach, and it's going to be a coach that Steve loves. And I think Steve would look at Sean McDermott and think he's wimpy. You know what I mean? Like just based on the Goodfellas guy I saw last week, I think he's gonna need that chin and that Jill Cower, that tough guy. You like because that's who Mike McDaniel's too earthy for him.
I don't know. I mean,
So
he's only hired one coach, so I mean,
well, that's why I'm interested to see where this is going to go. Whether this is going to be a young African American coach who's got a defensive background or an old sage, guy he wants to pay $15 million to. There's not a lot. I mean,
I mean,
McDermott's now the guy. If you're looking for somebody who's done it, who knows what he's doing, I know he knows what he's doing. I don't know anything about Nate Shieldhouse or any of the rest of these guys who might become the next Robert Sala or the next retread.
That
It's a
said,
big week, man.
what is McDermott? I mean, the reason you got rid of John Harbaugh is because he wasn't winning in January. McDermott hasn't won in January. You know what I
You
mean?
better
So
hope
what?
you can win in September, October, November too.
Well, that applies.
John
Same
did a
thing.
lot of that.
Sure. That's why I said. I mean, like, look, I think it was time for John. I support the Ravens going in a different direction, but you've got to make sure you hire the right guy, and
I'm
that's
just
why.
fascinated how he is God. He's the Wizard of New York now. Like he shows up and we brought credibility. Get some players because here they're the coach they hire here might not bring that credibility. To your point, it might be like hiring John Harbaugh, who had nothing. He was Jim's brother. He was a special teams coach. Like if they hire that sort of unproven person here, really say that that person really won the interviewing process, and that would speak to me. That would lighten Steve for me to say Steve looked at all of this and wound up being the Steve Yoda guy to say that's the next thing. The way I looked at Kevin O'Connell when I met him, spent time with him, and thought, I'd hire that guy. I've met a lot of coaches. I had one meal with Kevin O'Connell. I hire him.
Yeah. Well,
I mean that's I would hire Dan Quinn. I've spent a lot of time with Dan Quinn. I would hire Dan Quinn. Mike McDonald. I told you how I felt about him. I've spent 45 minutes with him ever. Everything about him said authenticity and genuine in a way that if you spend 5 minutes with John, it's a different vibe. It's a different vibe. I'll be honest with you. Spent a lot of time with John. So,
yeah,
and the way
yeah,
D'Amico
John,
Ryans comes across too. There's some of these
yeah,
young guys that have this calmness about them. Steve didn't have any calm in the press conference last week. I'm interested in. He's only picked one guy. He didn't even pick Ozzie or Eric. He just kept them on. He didn't even pick Chad Steele. Chad Steele was working for the company before and he didn't really even pick Sashi. Dick Cass picked Sashi. So Steve picking people, and I think it's about Steve in the end. Steve picking people. This is a big week, man. It'll be fun.
yeah. I mean, we're gonna find out. I still think Eric DaCosta, who is running the show for this, ran the show for this first round. I think he wants to find the next Sean McVay. Not saying that any of these 16 guys are even going to be that, or they might come to the conclusion that none of these 16 are that, and they might have to go in a different direction than that. But Eric being the intellectual that he is, and that, just the guy that's going to look at things, look for an edge, look for someone who's cutting edge, look for someone who's innovating. I think he wants the next Sean McVay. I don't know if any of these 16 guys actually are the next Sean McVay, right? I mean, Sean McVays aren't Hall of Fame coaches, don't grow on trees, right? That you just find new ones every year. So that's the question here. That's why I go back to how I felt in December. I mean, when we talked in passing about John Harbaugh and
Sean McVay's 39 now.
yeah. Well, that's why
Well,
I
you just
said
have a different level of energy when you're 35 than when you're Pete Carroll at this point. Even if you're Pete Carroll and you got a lot of energy.
Why people are talking about Davis Webb right now, whether he's ready right now or whether he's another year or two away. I mean,
I didn't realize McVay went to Miami of Ohio, same as Harbaugh, right?
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of coaches that have gone there. They have the coaching cradle there or whatever it's called, cradle of coaches. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna find out. But it's fascinating because you can try to make this as much of a science as you can, but how are these guys going to handle your football team, your players, whatever happens in the course of a 60-minute game, week after week after week? I mean, there's just a lot of unknown, and that's what makes it fun. They could hire the next Vince Lombardi, or they could hire a total dud, and
Sean McVay was born in January of '86. I remember January '86. So a little Challenger, explosion. So hey, 40 years ago today. He is Luke. He's over 40. I'm well over 40 at this point. We're gonna have a coaching search, and you're gonna get the little WNST tech service out, the Purple Plumes. I'm not worried about it right this minute. I'm thinking. Well, after the snow, we're on red alert around here to get coaches in here and all that stuff. We're going to play football this weekend. We're going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour and a cup of Super Bowl with our friends at the Maryland Lottery, Candy Cane Cash giveaways. Also, our friends at GBMC bringing that on. And Coppin State University. Hey, Coppin, we're making it happen. It's fun over there. Poor Gary Williams before the game, he said, I hope we only lose by 50 and not 80. As the South Carolina ladies get down over the weekend, and it was a lot of Gamecocks gear over in West Baltimore over the weekend too. I forgot how many people I know that went to South Carolina. So a big week around here. Football, We're going to do some baseball at some point because spring training's around the corner. Maybe the Orioles will sign a pitcher here this week and blow us up. But we are Baltimore positive. We're waiting for the next coach of the Baltimore Ravens and just talking a lot between now and then.